Friday marks 10 years since an EF4 tornado ripped apart the lives of so many in Pekin, East Peoria, and Washington.
And throughout this week, WMBD is taking time to actually remember that day and, more importantly, how Central Illinois stepped up to help.
And we start with the events of November 17th, 2013, as told by former WMBD journalists Andrew Barra and Lexi Sutter. Both arrived in Washington minutes after that storm.
And we begin our team coverage tonight with WMBD's Alexandra Suter, who's in hard-hit Washington, Illinois.
When we drove in, houses weren't standing.
We were following the storm. We were right behind it.
The sky just got so dark, and it was kind of a day like this. It was like oddly warm.
We didn't expect to stop in Washington.
We pulled in, and it was so quickly after that storm had moved through.
The first news crew that was on the scene after the tornado hit here in Washington.
Maria, it's really hard to put into words. I mean, we pulled up just minutes after this huge storm blew through, and
we felt like we were the first responders.
Helping someone get into a truck they had taken to the hospital.
You never think it's going to happen to your community. You never think you're going to be in the middle of a story like this.
You break down into tears. You can't describe it. You feel helpless, basically.
What's it like out there tonight?
Bob and Maria, it's very somber. It's very quiet.
It was like seeing a scene in a disaster movie, but when you see it in person, it's a huge shock.
I think for both of us, it was the first really huge story we covered like this.
We got out, and it was part, we have to be a news crew in part making sure everyone's all right.
So we were all kind of going through it together.
All this stuff you see, the trees, the houses, they weren't there.
You would never know, even by looking behind me, the destruction that was done here today.
And it made our reporting even more important.
You kind of get into like news person mode, trying to, get what you can.
This story, I think, was the first story of my career that was incredibly life-changing.
Once you live through this, I don't think you'll ever forget it, ever.
Police are still blocking off the roads, not letting anybody in and out of Washington unless you are a resident, just out of safety concerns.
This was a bad event, but it spawned so many good events that we got to cover.
You know what? Things will get better. You just got to look at it that way.
Washington was really special.
Now there are many shelters set up and many safe places that you can go.
Because so quickly they started making t-shirts and wristbands, and Washington Strong kind of became the motto.
How close this community came together.
And because it was the week before Thanksgiving, November 17th.
I think it added a lot of empathy for people, wanting to help out just neighbors.
Everybody had their life, and everybody was able to join together in a different way. I think it made it even more special Thanksgiving and a holiday season.
It was just very, very surreal, and obviously really thinking of all those people and hoping that everyone is okay as they continue to search and rescue.
It's ingrained in me. I think about it, and that imagery is in my head.
In terms of the impact of a story, I think this is number one, and it's not close.
Reporting on the Washington tornado and everything that happened after has really shaped who I've continued to be in my career.
WMBD's Sandra Chapman joins us now live in studio to show us how the church community actually banded together and the lingering effects to this day. Sandra.
Well, Durante, Rebecca, togetherness is the common word throughout the Washington faith community.
I could see the tornado. It was on the ground.
It's been 10 years since an EF4 tornado tore through the city of Washington on a Sunday morning.
The updraft and the downdraft that struck last Sunday.
At the time, Pastor Tom Goodell served as lead pastor of Crossroads Global Methodist Church. He remembers the moment it happened.
And I felt a pressure drop. Having experienced storms before, that's a scary thing when you just feel that pressure drop.
Washington residents say the tornado was unlike anything the community has ever experienced.
I want to talk about the downdraft of God's grace that we have felt so profoundly in this community.
Goodell and his church served as a beacon of hope for the community in the aftermath of the storm.
Keep on keeping on.
Church members set up generators, transforming the church into a shelter for hundreds.
It turned out that the parking lot lights were the most important thing, because as it got dark in Washington, and there was no electricity, people could see, hey, there are lights on out at the north end of town, which is where the church was. And so people just began driving towards the light.
Across the cornfield, Connect Church was holding service in Washington Middle School.
And grace, my fears revealing.
Members of the newly opened church, opening just 2 months before the storm, focused on the needs of their neighbors and provided practical support. They donated 3 cars, tires, and mattresses to those in need.
I think we found comfort during that time, just kind of focusing in, and certainly a lot of gratitude. Like, wow, there's a lot we've taken for granted in our lives. You know, this is a great reminder of all we have to be thankful for.
Both pastors say that faith helped the community weather the storm.
And there's no end of hope with the Lord.
But 10 years later, many residents still bear emotional and mental wounds. Caitlin Scott, Clinical Director for Family Corps, has some tips for those still struggling.
We find that people usually start with their inner circle that they're trying to communicate with some hard feelings, and then they might expand to seeking out some counseling services, seeking out support groups. Just find somewhere where you can get support from people that can kind of help you manage those feelings. Think about how you can change things to feel a little better in your environment.
And now our Chief Meteorologist, Chris Yates, joins us live in studio. So, Chris, what can you tell us about that day a decade ago?
Yeah, Rebecca and Durante, it was a unique meteorological event. It's Sunday, November 17th, 2013. The morning is off to a warm and comfortable start, but an incoming cold front spells trouble for central Illinois in just a few short hours. The events that are about to unfold over the Midwest have been forecasted well in advance. On November 14th, the Storm Prediction Center highlights the Mississippi and Ohio River valleys as an area that could potentially see severe storms, including tornadoes. In the days ahead, confidence in a significant severe weather event unfolding over the Midwest would increase, and SPC would expand the risk from a slight risk on the 15th to a high risk that stretches from Illinois to Ohio by 8 a.m. on the 17th. This high risk includes the potential for strong and/or long-track tornadoes. The night before, an area of low pressure takes shape over the Central Plains, and this low pressure deepens and approaches the Mississippi River. Breezy southerly winds bring an unseasonably warm and humid air mass to central Illinois, and by 10 a.m., the temperature in Peoria has risen to 69 degrees with a dew point of 62. As the cold front crosses the Mississippi River, an upper-level trough with a strong jet stream passes overhead. With the arrival of these colder temperatures aloft, the lid that held thunderstorms back that morning had been lifted, and the environment has become very unstable. Combined with strong wind shear, it's an explosive environment, and the countdown on this bomb is about to hit zero. A rare PDS tornado watch, a particularly dangerous situation, is issued for much of Illinois at 8:40 a.m., and storms begin to develop west of the Illinois River between 9 and 10 a.m. By 10:45, a cell begins to organize along the Illinois River, and the first tornado of the day touches down west of Pekin at 10:52. The tornado would lift just 2 minutes later. But when a tornado is moving at 55 miles per hour, it can cover a lot of ground in a very short amount of time. With a maximum width of 100 yards, the tornado carved a 2.5-mile path through northwestern parts of Pekin before lifting just south of Edgewater Drive at 10:54. The National Weather Service would rate this tornado an EF2 with maximum estimated winds of 120 miles per hour. While the first tornado lifted, the storm was far from done. At 10:59, a second tornado drops just outside of East Peoria and would go on to become the strongest tornado of the day. The tornado would churn through northern Tazewell County, gradually intensifying as it reaches Washington. Reaching a peak intensity with estimated winds of 190 miles per hour as it moved through Washington, the tornado leaves a half-mile wide path of destruction in its wake. The tornado was on the ground for an astonishing 48 minutes and traveled a distance of just over 46 miles. It was responsible for 3 fatalities, 135 injuries, and more than 1,000 homes destroyed. The estimated damage cost is more than $1 billion. 10 years later, the physical scars from that storm are still visible. And while the emotional scars of that day will continue to run deep and never fully heal, the way Washington has bounced back shows how and why this community is and always will be Washington strong. I received a significant amount of emails from viewers telling me their firsthand accounts of that day, many heart-wrenching. And as a fairly new resident to Washington, I've got to say I remain impressed by the strength of this community, and I'm proud to call it home.